Hey, there we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be where you are out there. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is JavaFritz, and this is C# with CSharpFritz. It's our beginner-friendly introduction to all kinds of .NET topics, C# programming language, .NET frameworks, and we're continuing our series this week on ASP.NET Core and building web applications with .NET. Look at it. It's all sunny outside. It's a great morning here on the East Coast. I've got my GitHub shirt on. I'm feeling good about things. How you doing out there, chat room? Let's check in with the chat room over here. And they're not there. Where'd the chat room go? Where'd the chat room go? What's going on there? What are you doing? There they are. See that? I knew they were here. How's it going there? Incurso is here. Vincent, aka Smartus19. Hello to you. Smarcod, good to see you. Spectari. Hello, hello. Tail Learn Code, one of our MVPs is here. Hello, hello. Good to see you. He's a member of the Live Coders team as well. So good to see you. Open Window 365. Nah, the hat command doesn't work. This is a Microsoft hat that I got. Gosh, it was a Christmas gift from the Mid-Atlantic region, Mid-Atlantic of the United States. They were handing these out at the local Microsoft store to all the employees, and I wandered over and picked one up. How's it going? Portal 7, Inbam Kumar, Dukasoft, hello, hello. Is that Shafti Abi? Hello, do I know Joe? Joe, let me think. I know several Joes. Let me know. Portal 7 from Argentina. Hello. Big Hype. Burger B, good morning to you. Martin Van Stem. Hello, hello. Charles, good to see you. And Rick is here. Hello. Oh my goodness. I see some familiar names there. So good to see familiar names. Thank you so much. It is chilly in Pennsylvania today. That's right. That's right. It is. Just a little bit. Not too bad. Oh my goodness. So we're continuing our series talking about ASP.NET Core. We started last week and showed just the basics, file new project, and what it was like to get involved with a little bit of a Razor Pages project. We're going to come back to Razor Pages in a few weeks. I want to get into MVC first because when folks think about ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core over the last 10 to 12 years, really they've focused on MVC, Model View Controller, this framework that was brought into ASP.NET Core. ASP.NET originally, it was brought in and layered on top of the old Web Forms framework, and it added value. It brought testability. It brought a little bit more structure, enforced structure, and coding by convention that helped folks build applications that ran smaller, faster, better. So that's what we're going to lean in today, and we're going to do a little bit of work with. Is that Jonathan from Ghana? Jonathan from Ghana. Hello, welcome in, Jonathan. Chris Jones is here. Shy Sharp. Hey, good afternoon to you. And there's the Stream Elements bot. You don't see it here, reminding us that there's a whole bunch of .NET bot emotes out there you can use in the Visual Studio channel here if you have the Better TTV extension installed in your browser. You'll see those pop up and you can use those. Let me get some music playing in the background here, and we'll start talking a little bit more about MVC and get into our lesson today, get into the session. Of course, all of these sessions are recorded. They're available online on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/.net, and look for the C# with CSharpFritz playlist, and you'll see all of these videos. There's 13 of them so far. This is the 14th. It'll be recorded and available in a day or two over there on that playlist. You'll be able to review it. You'll be able to get links to all the questions that are going to be asked along the way here. We'll see questions pop up right in this area of the video, and along the way we'll talk about source code. We'll have samples, we'll have links to documentation that you'll be able to access, and of course they're in the description just below the YouTube video here, and I'll give you a link to the GitHub repository in Twitch chat right now. Hey, Coding with Luce is here. Hello, hello. Good to see you. Yes, the GitHub README for last episode, I didn't finish writing yet. I need to get back in there and write it. Each time I write one of these READMEs, it literally takes me the better part of a day to really go through and boil things down that I want to present. And I'll even skip some sections because I want to go with the flow where your questions are that are going to lead the direction of the video. So there is some more content that I do need to add to some of the previous READMEs, particularly last week's. There's a lot more that I need to fill in there, and it'll get loaded out. It just takes, like I said, it takes me a little bit of time to write it because this is a one-man show right here. All right. So there's the link to that. Like I mentioned, I want to get some music playing in the background here. This is Stream Beats from Harris Heller. And today I'm playing the Lo-Fi playlist. This is some groovy music that we're going to have playing in the background that just sounds cool, relaxing. It's free. All the rights are made available to you if you want to use this music in the background of your YouTube videos, your Twitch streams. All rights are granted so that you can use them and listen to them. I'm listening to this playlist off of Spotify. It's available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, wherever you listen to music on the internet. Thank you so much, Harris. We appreciate you making this music available for us to listen to and kind of have hanging in the background, sounding groovy while we're writing some code together. So, you love documentation, Luce, so if you can help somehow, even if it's translating a brain dump into docs, let you know. Thank you. That's very nice of you to offer. It's honestly a bit of me translating and getting a bit of it synced to paper to the markdown. So there's the GitHub repository. I linked that in Twitch chat. Like I said, you can find it just below in the description here if you're watching the YouTube video. I didn't get featured chat running yet here. Let me finish cleaning my my gunners, and we'll get featured chat open, and then we'll take a look at our code for today. So there really wasn't sample code for last week where we were going through and talking about just getting started with ASP.NET Core, because really it was a file new project and just kind of exploring what was in the basic project there. So there wasn't too much to really focus on and get into and need to share. So but we'll get into this. We'll definitely get into this. Yeah, the green square in my logo is a little see-through because I'm using the green screen. Harris's music was on your Spotify 2020 top list. Yes, it was on mine as well. So let me see here. Cool. Let me get into, I'm going to open a second copy of this over here. There we go. So, we use GitHub for the repository for this show, for this stream, so that everybody can kind of see what's going on, ask questions through issues, and get links to all the documentation, the samples, and use this as a good gathering place to talk about and work through anything that we're doing here on stream. So let me head over here to, there it is, there's the GitHub repository. I shared those links, and you'll see there's a series of Jupyter notebooks that you can launch through Binder to get you started with C#. If you haven't tried C# before, there's I think there's 10 Jupyter notebooks out there that you can work through, you can try out and learn more about. And there's instructions if you want to run things locally, the code of conduct, the contributor covenant if you want to interact, send some pull requests, contribute to documentation, whatever you'd like to interact with the stream that we do here. All of the samples for this session and the sessions going forward where we're working with now the user interface frameworks are here under sessions. All of the season 1 sessions that have sample code that don't work inside of a notebook, you need to actually have running locally, they're sitting here. And of course season 2 is here. I'm down working in this branch today. If you're watching the recording, this will be merged into the main branch, and this is where we're going to be working with Model View Controller. 02, Season 2, 02, Episode 2, and here's my README all about what we're going to talk about today, Model View Controller. So I've written all of this. I'm not sure why it says MVC model there. Oh, it's not, it can't find my image. Ah, rats. I have a pretty good idea why that's not showing. No matter. We'll get that cleaned up before the documentation goes. Yep, I knew it. I knew it. It's because this is all uppercase, isn't it? Because when I saved it, yeah, when I saved the document, it was uppercase. Nice. Thanks. So let's talk about MVC. That's right, Saint. Videos are available afterwards, usually within a day or two. I try and get them released later the same day, but sometimes I have a bunch of meetings and it pushes some of those interactions out. But I don't have anything later today. I might be able to push this one out sooner than later. So, we are not using Discord for this. Nope. There is not a Visual Studio Discord. There is a C# Guild Discord out there, but this channel is not affiliated with that. You know what? I could probably edit and just fix that link to that real quick, because this is in its own branch. There we go. Yep, commit that, and that'll look right for us. There we go. So, Model View Controller. It's kind of weird that they named the user interface framework after a pretty typical, pretty well-known and well-used user interface architecture, right? When you're building an application, when you're building a project, this is a somewhat common architecture that folks use for building projects. Now, the very idea of we have these three categories of objects that we're going to use to build an application, a model, a view, and a controller, is not foreign or new. This concept's been around for a long time. It's how we put those together, how we allocate those objects that becomes interesting, that becomes compelling. And if we can build our user interface framework such that it significantly encourages using these three types of objects and puts those together for us in a very efficient way, now we're talking. Now we're in a model, we're in a development model that is something very friendly, very easy for folks to wrap their heads around, and it also encourages good behavior. It encourages good, clean development practices. So there are ways that you can violate. You can do some significant coding in your view to have it go and fetch and interact with all kinds of data. It's going to drag down the performance of your application, but there are ways to violate the concepts of this. So, let's, and before I get too far into this, I do want to make sure and encourage you that this is an AMA stream. Any questions that you ask I'll be answering along the way, and you'll see them pop up over here as we bring them up. But we're staying AMA. We're staying Ask Me Anything around C# and ASP.NET MVC. We don't want to get too far outside of this because we do want to stay on topic. We do want to be beginner friendly, and I want to encourage some of those simple questions, some of those basic questions for folks that are just getting started. There is no question that I will turn away because it's too simple. I want to hear your questions. If you have a question about that, there's a high likelihood that someone else either watching live or watching the recording is going to have a similar question. So please, even if your English isn't perfect, that's okay. Go ahead, ask your question. We'll work it out and make sure that you get the answers you need so that you can learn to use things like ASP.NET MVC. All right? So first question that I want to go to here, it's a little bit more advanced, but I'm going to bring it up here. Black Eye asks, how would you integrate a view model inside of MVC? Now, we haven't gotten, I need to explain the differences here between the various objects. I'm going to pin that question so I can come back to that. Model view controller, 3 classes of objects. A model is the data, the information, the interaction that you're going to present to your users, and we want to make that as simple as possible. So it's really just a traffic cop. It's just not even a traffic cop. It's just a delivery mechanism to give data to your users and receive data from them. The view you can think of as formatting of the data, the skin, the theme that you're going to wrap around your model so that your users have nice text boxes, some drop-down boxes. How they're going to interact with that data, how it's going to be presented to them, how they're going to send it back to you is what your view is. And the controller puts those 2 pieces together. The controller knows how to go get the data and apply the view to it, how to receive data from the user, transform it appropriately, store that back in whatever data repository you're using, and present the next view. So those are the 3 responsibilities of the objects that we're going to have in our MVC application. So coming back to the question of, well, how do you integrate a view model inside of MVC? The concept of a view model is something a little bit more complex than just a model that's just delivering data. Sometimes we refer to a view model because it contains things, it's structured such that it's built specifically for that type of view. It has data that's been aggregated from several different repositories, right? And I'm using the term repository instead of database because it might be a web service, it might be file storage on disk, it might be different locations that you're pulling together and you're presenting as a unified object that needs to be presented on screen for your users to interact with. So your view model could be just a super model, a superset of model that brings together content from several locations and isn't exactly what's being stored in one repository. It can also have methods and events on it that are specific to that object and integrate and raise and provide different interactions. Now, in traditional ASP.NET MVC, we don't like to use a view model that has methods and events in it that are going to trigger other interactions, because when the model is delivered to our viewers, it's been rendered, it's been painted as HTML, and at that point you have no more control over it. You're going to receive some sort of an object coming back, and that object is going to be specific to the interaction with the view. You're going to need to parse, interact with it, and hand off somewhere else. We're actually going to talk more about receiving and doing data interactions next week in the second part of our discussion about MVC. So we're not going to get too far into using view model architecture. So yes, you can always be smart and do things the wrong way. With great power comes great responsibility. Wise man once said that. Blazor is a little bit more MVVM, yes, and we'll talk about Blazor in the spring, early summer. That'll be in another series of episodes. So, all right, let me get into now. I don't have the topics plotted out for the future, only because I want to see how fast we go through these things in this series of episodes before I start mapping out here's all the other topics. So I do want to get them plotted out, and they will be specified, but there's a lot to cover, and I want to see and understand exactly where we are before I plan out the entire syllabus, I guess, is what we would describe. So MVC as a user interface framework is very easy for you to get started and build with. When we look at the templates that are made available to us by the .NET SDK, there's a ton of these here, right? We're going to particularly choose the MVC one here, ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller, and it's got a bunch of great stuff in it for us, already built, already set up for us to interact with. If you're on the command line, .NET New MVC-O, whatever the file name is you want to create. I'm going to open Visual Studio 2019. This is the first time I'm going to use Visual Studio 2019 on this stream, and let me walk through creating an ASP.NET MVC application here, so you can see a little bit of what this looks like, because I think this will visualize a little bit better the project and what we're going to be working through here. So I'm going to build an ASP.NET project, not necessarily on Windows, and this is really a web project. There we go, ASP.NET Core Web Application. I'm going to step through and I'm going to get to choose what I want to call this. Let me just call this my first application and let it create that. Now I get to choose from all these different templates, right? We saw all the different templates inside the document there. Well, I'm particularly choosing ASP.NET Core Web App with Model View Controller. There's some other options here that we can configure, including Docker support, HTTPS. We recommend you keep HTTPS turned on by default. You want to be delivering your applications by default with SSL, with transport layer security, so that, right, that's now kind of the default on the web, is that everybody goes to a secure version of your website. It also then enables HTTP2, so you'll get things like multiplexing and better performance back and forth in your requests to the web server. So here I am in Visual Studio 2019, and it's already got my Solution Explorer open on the side there. I can see I have my dub root folder, just like we had last time, that has CSS files, JavaScript files, some libraries, and it comes with some older libraries that are traditional, have been around, and are well used, well loved. Bootstrap, jQuery, that you can use, and they're continuing to be supported, and a lot of folks enjoy using. So our CSS for the site is here. Our JavaScript for the site by default is right here, so that you can access and refer to these inside your applications. Program and startup, we saw last time, program starts up our web server, and startup is handed off the state of the web server so that it knows how to bootstrap and run our application. So when we think about that, we have these two methods in here, configure services and configure. This time, when we look at configure services, we have this method, add controllers with views. And this is what sets up our models, views, and our views and controllers. Models is something that you're going to be building as the application developer to work with. So now our ASP.NET framework knows how to identify controllers, how to start them, how to process views and interact with them. We're going to see more about what that means in a minute. Our configure method down here, we learned last time, it configures the HTTP pipeline. It configures how requests are received, handled, and processed. And this is identical to what we saw last time when we were taking a look at the basics with Razor pages. But I want to call your attention to this block right here. Use endpoints, and now endpoints map controller route. And this is how we're going to template, we're going to generate URLs from our application such that it knows how to take a URL and turn it into, route it to the code that we're going to execute for that address. That's not too hard to understand. We need to learn how to take a web address and decide what code to execute for that. And in MVC, it's not a page or a location on disk that we're going to go to open up and return the contents of. No, no, no. We're going to execute a controller that has an action method inside of it, and we'll pass some parameters into that action method if they're tacked onto the end here. So this looks like an address, but it's not. It's actually defining a mapping to a class called a controller that has methods we call actions and passes parameters into that. Those are the three segments of the address. And we use this technology called routing to translate from that URL into that method to be executed, or to go the other way, from that method to generate a URL. It's actually a two-way mapping. In this way, you can direct folks to go and get a URL. Go navigate to that other address. Send your browser over there and execute and return that result. And I can tell you to go execute that method without knowing the complete address that is going to be generated. Because there's ways that you can actually remap this, change up the syntax of it for search engine purposes, for reasons that make it easier for our human eyes to understand than what the machine is actually interacting with. So we'll see a little bit more about routing and some of the tricks we can pull with that. We might get to it at the end of this session. Otherwise, we'll definitely hit it next session. Let me go to this question here from Vidal129. Which Microsoft content is good for learning .NET Core? Would you have a link to give me? So this series that you're watching right now, if you take a look at the GitHub repository, will give you all kinds of content that you can start with. To learn C#, there's links to go off and learn. There's 12 videos out there that'll get you started with C#. There's links to the documentation. There's links to additional videos in there. But if you want to go out to the .NET website, there is a learn link up at the top of that website. So if you go to .net, and there's a learn link up at the top, I will share that link in chat, and I'll also post it just below here. If you're looking for some help, there's a complete Learn.net series of videos, whether you want to use .NET to build web applications, desktop applications, cloud applications, IoT applications, mobile applications, games. You can build all of these things with .NET. There's a complete link, series of links and tutorial documents that you can get into to learn all about the various ways you can use .NET. All right. So, hey, welcome in, friends. I see some new folks joining us in chat. Thank you so much for tuning in today, this Monday morning, East Coast time here in the States. So, this is a little bit about, this is all I really want to talk about routing right here, okay? Before we get into the first topic of actually writing code, actually, let me run this application so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to run it. Now, there's two different ways we can run this inside of Visual Studio. I can either choose to run with the application name, my first application, or I can run it and host it on IIS Express. That's the Internet Information Server Express Edition. That's the web server that ships with Windows. The Express version is a developer-friendly version that you can run on your desktop without having to have, without needing any kind of administrative permissions on your machine. And it opened over here. Let me just go there. There we go. I'll zoom in a bit. And it's a very simple website you get by default when you start up the MVC application. My first application is added as the name of the application in the top left. So I get a little home button up there that'll bring me back to the home page. The title is placed here in the footer, along with links to a privacy policy. Thanks to some of the policymakers and laws that we have around the world, it's a good idea to have a privacy policy with any application that you're going to publish for the open web. So there's links here, so you can list a privacy policy with whatever information you're going to be collecting and disclosing to your visitors, so they know how they're interacting with your website. So this is running all down here on the command line. Okay, this is running the Kestrel web server only because I chose to run with the application name there in Visual Studio. Right, I have two ways to run it. It's now hiding behind this continue button. So this is running just the Kestrel web server. If I chose the other way with IIS, what happens then is the Internet Information Services web server starts up, and it uses a module that's plugged into it that will launch and run your application directly. And it kind of goes around Kestrel at that point. It knows how to interpret and run it, and that module that's installed in IIS has all the same features as Kestrel. It's just very tightly coupled to IIS so that it's easier to run your application. There's a question here. Let me bring this up. Is that Inbam Kumar? Let me show the question here. How would you run it from Kestrel or IIS using the .NET command line? So when you are at the .NET command line, you can't install and run it from IIS directly. You're going to need to deploy and host it on the server, and there you would end up having to publish and take that published code that's intended for IIS and move it over onto the web server. We'll talk about publishing and how to get this running in different environments another time when we get a little bit further down into hosting and deploying our applications. But for right now, when you're on the .NET CLI and you want to run with Kestrel, you execute .NET Run, just like we saw with console applications. .NET Run will restore any package references, compile your application, launch your application, and because an ASP.NET Core application is a command line application, we can see that here in Program CS, it's a console application with a public static void main. We see that signature in our console applications as well. It starts the web server and runs it, hands off the request to it. So you can run this on Windows, Mac, or Linux just by saying .NET Run. Okay? Thank you for the question. Really appreciate that. Tymat has a question here. Do you need a client-side library like Angular or React, or will .NET Core control all client-side actions? So let me clear up something. ASP.NET Core runs on top of now .NET 5 and previously .NET Core. Going forward, think about ASP.NET Core runs on top of .NET, because that's the name of the frameworks we're going to be using going forward, the runtime frameworks. Going forward, it's going to be in that format. So ASP.NET renders and delivers HTML from the server. If you want to do any type of rich client-side interaction, you will need some sort of a client-side library. Angular, React, Vue, Blazor, these will all work client-side in the browser, provide those rich interactions that folks enjoy. You don't have to do that. You can use straight HTML interactions back and forth if that makes you happy. If that's the feature set you need, you can do that. But ASP.NET Core delivers rendered web pages, rendered HTML that is interpreted, that is constructed server-side to the browser. Good question. Thank you. Appreciate that question. I need some more context there, Tutti Frutti. Give me some more context in your question. So this is right. This is how it starts, and we saw there's the startup class over here, and now it maps a controller route. Now, I mentioned our controllers kind of glue together our views and our models, and that's where the basics, where the beginning of our code, and the most similar to what we've seen already with C# development, the most similar code that you're going to see, experience, and interact with here. Tutti Frutti's asking about, can I create an ASP.NET Web Forms app? Not with .NET 5, not with .NET Core. The ASP.NET Web Forms user interface framework is no longer supported on these frameworks. It actually wasn't supported on any of these frameworks. It's only supported on the older .NET framework that ships with Windows. It is going to continue to receive support. However, going forward, the Web Forms user interface framework is not supported, is not available with .NET 5, with .NET Core. So it is at this point, you could refer to it as a legacy framework. It's no longer receiving new features, but it is maintaining for security and updated web features to maintain compatibility with HTTP and web standards going forward. Sorry, we don't issue swag. We don't send swag out as part of the stream here. We save issuing swag for various events that we want to have, and we'll send out stickers and other kinds of things here. Thank you for the question. I see my friend Fierce Kittens is trying to goad me on here. MVPs do get swag sent to them and things for through the MVP Summit and the MVP program. I see what's going on here. Will we add? Oh, that's a little bit more advanced question. But what about cores? Cores is a concept in web development, cross-origin resource sharing. It's an acronym. We'll talk about cores probably next week, the week after. Cores is a little bit more complex topic here about what happens when I need to serve content, when I need to serve requests that come in from other domains, that are referred to my web server from different locations. How do you process and handle that? Cores is a little bit trickier, and I definitely want to get to that, but it's going to be a episode or two down the line here. I'm going to actually create an issue in the GitHub repository to make sure that I get back to and cover cores in the future. So I will make sure that that's a topic that we cover. Yes, Fierce Kittens, you are my friend, and I do send presents. I sent a nice shirt, nice Live Coders jersey and everything. So, do we store these sessions? Yes, click through to the GitHub repository. There's a link to the playlist there. There are 13 episodes out there, more if you're watching this recording, that you can tune in and learn more about and see this beginner-friendly walkthrough with C# and now getting into ASP.NET Core. All right. So let's talk about the controllers. The controllers really are C# classes in ASP.NET that handle those interactions you're going to get from the folks visiting your website. And it looks like a regular C# class. There's some new objects here that we need to learn about, but it looks and presents just like a regular class. I know how to write methods. I know how to work with fields and constructors here. These are things that I, as a C# developer, know. I just need to learn a little bit about what these objects are that I'm going to be interacting with. So when we saw our website that was presented, because of that routing definition that we had back over here in Startup, right? We had a default route that was defined that is going to map a controller and then an action. And we have this equal sign saying, well, here are the default values, the home controller and the index action. So our home controller is, by convention, a controller class named home. Now, the naming for that, by convention, is going to be something controller. That really tries to make it easy for you to locate and set up what these classes are named so that you can learn and identify exactly what is processing and handling that request. So there was nothing defined, so by default it went to home. That's this controller. It goes into this class, and there was no other second element of the URL that was specified. So it's going to execute the index action method, and here it is on lines 21 through 24. Okay, so we've now seen that route home index is going to bring me right here, and I can actually navigate directly to, right, home/index, right, and it brings me to that same location that I got when I went to just /localhost/, right, because that's a default. Well, I can be more explicit, and it goes to the same location, the index action on my home. Now, in this method, there's two things here we need to figure out. Public means that this is an endpoint. This is a URL. This is an action that anybody can execute, right? It's got public scope. If it was marked private, you wouldn't be able to get to it, right? Right, if I stop this, make this private. In fact, I'm going to run this in the background. Where did I put this? Dev my first application. There it is. I'm going to use .NET Watch. So .NET Watch is a command that you can use to watch a project, and as the project changes, automatically reload it. Okay, or automatically rebuild it. Whatever verb you pass after watch, it will execute whenever there's a change. So in my case, I'm going to say .NET Watch run. Run this application and rebuild it anytime there's a file change. So I will not have to refresh my browser. It should give me the appropriate hook and restart it for me. So I'm going to bring this instance right over here. Go ahead and refresh. Why am I not seeing? So here we go. I made this private. It doesn't have a page to go to. There isn't anything there. So my browser returned nothing. And when I hit F12, right, and right, even Control U, it didn't return anything because there's nothing at that address. Didn't give me a 404 page or anything because we haven't configured to return a 404 page, a file not found. It's just going to go silent and not return anything. You can set up error pages appropriately for interacting with those types of requests, but you don't need to. It'll behave properly and just not return anything. And because I didn't return anything there, I'll change that back to public. This will rebuild, and it didn't actually hook in, so it'll do the refresh for me. So I need to force the refresh here, and there's my page. Now, we should be able to see, if I take a look at the source code. Yeah, here we go. See this? If we look in the console, it says .NET Watch reload socket connected. So as I change my code, this will automatically refresh the page. All right, so let me drag that down so we can see a little bit more of the page. Now, where's it getting the content that it's actually painting on the screen? This is our controller action method. What's this view doing, and what's an action result? So whenever you make a request from a web server, we need to perform some sort of an action and return a result that's appropriate for the browser or for an HTTP client that's making a request to interact with it. If you use an iActionResult return type, what that will do is emit an appropriate HTTP status code. And for those of you that know things about web servers, you know that we want to send some 200 status codes when the response is okay. We're going to send some 300 status codes when we need to tell the browser to do something different. 400 status code when there's some sort of an error that the browser made, or a 500 series error code when there's a mistake that we made on the server. We need to notify the browser or our client appropriately so they know how to respond to that, how to surface that result to the human that's interacting with it. So an action result will return the status code and return, and you apply some formatting to whatever it is that you send along. And in my case, we're going to give it the default response of execute the view method. This is a method that comes as part of the controller class that we're inheriting. All of our controllers either inherit from controller, or there's an even simpler one that has less features called base controller. Well, if we want to execute and work with MVC, you should start with just controller. There's times you want to step down to the more basic base controller. We'll get into that when we talk about APIs in a few weeks. But we're going to work with just controller. The view is an object, is a method, come here you, right, is a method on the base object. I have all these methods and properties on the controller that allow me to interact with the information about the request that was submitted. So by returning view, I'm instructing the controller, hey, there's a view template out here that you need to apply and return the results of that template to the requester. And if that view template was applied properly, returning HTTP 200 status code that indicates it was successful. So this is something that you're going to see a lot of when you're returning and working with web pages. And this is just returning a view and saying go format and return. I don't have any data we're passing you. Now, where does it get that template? Where does that template live? And once again, this is by convention. We know that our view files, our view templates, live inside of a views folder. And the views folder is organized very simply, intending to bring out the templates, locate them according to the controllers that are going to interact with them. So our home controller is going to house its view templates in the home folder. Kind of makes sense, right? This is what we talk about, what we mean when we talk about convention over configuration. By the convention of this being named home controller, we're surfacing the home part of the URL /home, and we're storing our templates in a folder called home. Even more so, the name of the template for the index method, if we don't specify a name of a template, it goes and returns Index.cshtml, and there's the welcome and the learn about building web apps with ASP.NET Core, where that message came from. And right, I can add some more things down here. Right, hello Visual Studio channel on Twitch and .NET channel on YouTube, right? Save that. My code will rebuild and it'll automatically reload and display on the screen for me, right? The CSHTML file, the view, is a mashup of C# and HTML. It intertwines these two so that you can continue writing C# to format the HTML, the content that you're going to return to the browser or to the visitor that's going to interact with your application. Jason, let me pin that question. Let me come back to that in a bit. Hey, Kierben, welcome in. So very easy for me to format in content that I'm going to place here, right? I mean, I can quite understandably come in and right, we saw last week, I can put whatever HTML that I want here. I can say color blue, font weight bold, and no big deal, it refreshes and shows me that format. I mean, right, this is kind of garden variety rules of the road. This is what you expect from a framework that's going to generate and format HTML for you. Big deal, right? But what if I wanted to return a different template when a different circumstance occurs? Right? I'm returning this view, and this view really is the middle of my page. We'll talk about how this gets formatted in a minute here. But what I want to show you is inside my controller, I'm returning view here. Well, I could tell it to go return some other view if I wanted, some other template instead, right? Maybe I've got an index that I want to issue for the holidays, right? So let's call this holidays index, right? And if I go back to my page here, it's going to refresh, and now I get an error page. This is the developer error page that I'm returned because something happened on the server, something that we as a developer need to debug and figure out. The view holidays index was not found, and it tells me where it's searched. So we're learning a little bit more about where we can place our templates inside of our application, not just in /view/home. This is a priority order that you see up here. It's going to search first in this folder for that file, and then it's going to search in a shared folder to see if that file exists there. This way, you can have kind of a default that it'll fail over to, and you can go look up and interact with. Okay, but now I know where I need to place my file. If I want to create a simple view for the holidays, right? You may be celebrating whatever holiday it might be going on for you. So I'm just going to say add new view, and I've got some extensions that are causing a little bit of an issue here. No matter, I'll go file, and I will create a razor view here, and I will call this, what was it, holidays index? Is that what I called it? Yeah, holidays index. And I can put whatever content I want in here, right? Happy holidays. Save that, and it's going to attempt to reload. Nope, it's not. I'll force a refresh. Oh, no, it's not. Because I got a new file. .NET Watch doesn't pick up on new files in the project, so you have to kick it. So here we go. Building. Now it's running, and there it is. Happy holidays. So it's my same index template is sitting there. My same index method executed, but it routed to a different location. This may be important to you. You may want to deploy and handle things appropriately because, right, maybe you want to say something like if datetime.now.month equals 12, right? Then return my holidays flavor of the index page. Otherwise, just return the view, right? So that'll save and update, and it'll refresh here. It'll hopefully refresh here. It should have refreshed here. And it's still showing me the same page, right? Right, if I change this to the 11th month, it'll update, and I should get the regular index page back. There it is. So I haven't changed the logic inside of my views. I'm just routing to different ones, choosing different ones from inside of my action methods. And that may be important to you. That may be something that you want to set up logic, format my content because this user has a specific role. Maybe this user is from a specific geography. Maybe this user is a certain age. I don't know, whatever your case may be, and you want to change and use a completely different template instead, you have those options available to you. I see a couple questions coming in here. Let me pause and take these questions. And I also want to take Jason's question there. Yes, that is an expected behavior. It doesn't detect new views. It doesn't detect new files on disk. You need to restart it. But if you're working and editing existing files, no problem. Let me take this one from Inbam Kumar first. Do we have Index.cshtml.cs as we see in Razor pages? No. In this case, your template is just Razor, is just the HTML and C# mixed together. Our controller is what's providing the logic and handing off to that Razor template. And we'll get into handing off some content, handing off some logic to the Razor template here in just a minute. So the interactions, the server-side behavior that you have with Razor pages all happen in the controller and behind one of these action methods instead of in a separate class as you have with Razor pages. Vidraz asks a question here. This is a good question. Where do we write JavaScript? I noticed JavaScript files in separate folders, but are you linking to those files, and can you write it in the C# files itself? Very good question, and this is a good segue into the next the next topic I want to get to here. We saw this content is really the middle of my page. A layout is applied to all of my Razor content, and that layout lives down here in layout CSHTML, and it specifies the layout through this start page, right? Every one of our Razor templates actually goes through this page first that specifies here's the layout file, and by convention folks don't typically change this so that you have a layout here. You could write some code if you want to have it deliver different layouts based on the request coming in. You can interpret and specify a different default layout using this file, and it routes through and applies this layout that actually gets executed after the Razor page. We'll see how this is kind of the reverse order interaction. Now, this layout has some C# code executing inside of it, and it also has, as we saw also with Razor pages, it has a render body method, and this specifies here's where the content of our template is going to be delivered. When that template is done rendering, stick it right here. Now, if I want to write JavaScript, if I want to include JavaScript libraries in the default template that we have here, of course, the scripts are down here right before the closing body, where you would expect them to be for better performance in rendering. Okay, but there's also now this method, render section async. And what this does is it says there may be sections inside of my template named scripts that we shouldn't render as part of this body here, but instead grab that section and render it down here. Now, let's talk about what a section is. I'm going to go back to my index page, and let me actually modify my home controller here. I'm going to remove... let me leave that test. That's for the 11th month. So we'll be able to work over here. I can add and define a section inside of my view by adding a section directive. I give it the name of the section that I want to define, scripts, so that this matches up with the layout, scripts over here. It's not required to be on the page, right? If I push this and I specify that's true, I'll get errors on those pages that don't have a scripts element. So I have my script section here, and I can certainly add, right? I'm not limited to adding JavaScript here. I could put whatever content I want to put at the bottom of the page if I'd like to, but I'll just write some script and write hello world, just so there's something there. I'll let this refresh, and of course, hello world. Now, whatever script you want to write, you want to interact with, you want to configure your page with, you can add references to script libraries there specific to that page, or something that you want to be reusing, right? It's up to you what you want to put there at the bottom. But what I want you to see is when you view the source of the page, right? So here's the layout. There's that main entry. Here's where my content, where that render body was triggered. Right here, there's the content of my index template. And there's where my scripts section was rendered. So I can separate this, and I can create sections of content that are placed in different places inside of my layout by using the section command. All right. What did they remove? I see a question here about they removed something. Now, let me back up just a smidge here. So we've got a little bit. You're welcome, Vidraz, and right. That's the kind of interaction. That's the kind of questions, and why I don't try to drive out too much of this is exactly where we're going to be on every episode, because what's more important, it's not as important that I'm here lecturing and talking to you and teaching. What's more important is that I'm answering your questions. That's where the value is. And if you're watching the YouTube video, I sweep through and read the comments and the questions just below the video about once a week and try to answer anything new that may have popped up. So that is a bit off topic, Tutti Frutti. We'll get to that when we talk about configuration in the future. So Jason's asking a question here. Let me there's a question about, well, where exactly what does it do with that Razor template? I'm going to oversimplify this question just a little bit. So when these templates are executed, what it actually does is it turns this content into text and some C# code to be executed. So if I right click on this folder home, and I'm going to open that folder in my file explorer. Let me go over here. So here I am inside of my views folder. If I go up to my first application, when the application compiles, it creates a bin folder and an obj folder. Bin is where all the binaries to run my application lives, and it's under debug .NET 5 because that's the framework that I'm using. And there's the exe for this project. You can see the code that Razor template generates if you go under obj here, step into debug, and here under Razor views, and there is my index pages. It's very small to see there. No, I can't zoom. If we open up and take a look at one of these, what one of these looks like. So let me choose the index one because that actually has a little bit of C# in it. Let me open that with Notepad. This is not intended for humans to read, but you can look at this if you want to learn how Razor works. You can see we're marking this as this is generated code. And there's information in here about here's where this came from, where the content came from, and all of this. Look at this. Defining the script section, writing some HTML directly into the page, right? And where was it? Right here, it's going to execute and get data from, well, it's specifying the index. Where'd it go? The layout. The view imports is up top, where that came from. Where'd it go? There's a place here where it specified the layout. Layout. View imports. Why don't I see the layout? Right, and other globals of where it passes in to be able to do rendering. I don't see it. No matter. Yeah, I'm surprised. I don't see it. But it knows how to mash that together and get the content for you appropriately. Yeah. So not something that you need to dig into, not something that you need to know, but it's there if you ever want to go and learn about what's being generated, what's being interacted with. Let me go to the next question that I have here from, is that Arcatufus? Is that how you pronounce this? Is there a way to make the renderer render the indentation pretty? There are ways to interact with it. It's not something by default you do with ASP.NET, because really the source that's generated, most folks don't care about how it's presented, but you can use some tools called middleware. We'll learn about that later on in the series, that will interact with your code, format it, and you can do different things with your code as it's being served to whoever's requested it. Not just your code, but the content you're delivering. You can do this. I think there is a NuGet package that will do this for you. It's typically not a concern for most folks that are delivering HTML, only because they want to smash down and take up as little content as possible. They want to compress this and minimize the amount of content that they're delivering to the browser. So they'll actually get rid of the tabs, the spaces between the various tags, so that it's very small. It's less payload. It's less bits that we're shipping across the wire. So, like I said, this isn't typically a concern that developers have, but it is possible to do. Take a look for a NuGet package that'll help you with that. No, Razor does not have any kind of a code behind at this point, but you can, like I showed, you can see what it renders. So, there is a question here from Imbam Kumar about how do you debug scripts in MVC? Well, at the point that they're delivered to the browser, you're now in the browser. You can use the browser's debugger at that point, right? I can certainly turn on the debugger here, take a look at my index page that's delivered, and I should be able to see my hello world script in here. Did I turn that off? Did I remove it? Let me force a refresh. There it is, right? I can put a breakpoint there and step through and see it, stop and debug it if I'd like. It's hiding behind. There it is, right? I can set a breakpoint just like you would in any other browser and be able to interact with my client-side scripts. If I needed to interact with my, where'd it go? Continue. If I needed to interact with, yes, I know. Continue. Why aren't you running? You make me sad, Visual Studio. Firefox. There we go. Right? Okay, thank you. If you wanted to debug your code that's running server-side, if you're using Visual Studio or some other integrated development tool that does have the ability to attach to the .NET runtime and debug it, you can place breakpoints inside your code, and when you debug from within that tool, it will properly stop and you can inspect and interact with those things. So, different options, different choices for how you can work with that. Now, all I've shown you at this point is, well, here's how I choose a view, right? Let's back up and talk about a model for a second and interacting with those views, right? So, and we know how to locate a view, but if I want to pass a model, right? This is MVC. I want to pass a model, some data, some information into that template that I want to be interacted with. How do I do that? What does that mean? What does that look like? So maybe I want to define, maybe I have some sort of a product class, right? And I'll add over here in my models folder, I'll add a new class over here. And I'll for the purposes of keeping this simple, I'll just call this a product class, right? Maybe you're building, right, the standard example if you're building a shop, you're building a storefront. And right, your product has an ID, it has a name, and and it has a price, right? So I'll put a decimal here. Oh no, and we'll make this price US dollars. Okay, and maybe on this page I want to return information about that product. So maybe I fetched that from a data store somewhere. For the purposes of showing how you pass that product onto the page, let me just create a product here, my hat, and this is a new product, right? I'm going to instantiate a product object, just give it an ID. Name equals right, Fritz's Microsoft hat, and price in USD is $10.99. All right, so I've defined, here's a product object. Let me wrap these up, these properties nicely here. Okay, so there's something that I want to pass. I fetched this from somewhere, interacted with a database. Maybe I loaded it from disk or from a web service, but I've got this product and I want to interact with it on my page. Well, you can pass that as an argument into your view method. The view method takes many different overloads, many different formats here. I can pass an object into it for the model that I want it to render. The name of the view and the object that I want it to render. So by just passing only the model, it's going to go to, because it doesn't have the name of the view to go to, it's going to go to the index and pass through this model object, this product called my hat. Now if I save that, this should, there it is, it's rebuilding. It's going to identify and load up all my content here. And we're going to see, please stop talking about MVVM. I don't want to confuse people. That's an advanced topic that I do not want to get into. We're literally talking about passing models. I don't want to get into advanced architectures at this point and different ways to do this. So it's rebuilt. I can go back to my page, and I need to remove that JavaScript at this point. That's getting a little annoying. Right, let me go back to the view over here. Comment that out so it isn't reloading. It's going to trigger a reload here. File changes detected, reload it. Now my script doesn't, that JavaScript doesn't run. All right, now I've passed that product in here. I need to do something. I want to put information about that hat product on the page. How do I interact with that and present its content on my web page? So the first thing that we're going to learn about here is interacting with the model object. So this is a directive that you place inside of your CSHTML that specifies that, hey, there's a model that we're working with, and I can interact with it. Right? Let me put an entry right here. I'll say something like the product we're showing is at an uppercase model will allow me to reference, this is a dynamic object, and I can say model.name. Now, when the page refreshes, I'm seeing it dance up here and wondering what happened here. Oh. We're not going to use that just yet. Let it rebuild. Hit it again. There we go. So this is a dynamic object. I'm able to reference the model here that was passed through from my view. It's passed in that object. And in Razor, I'm implicitly saying output the content of that property as a string right there in my HTML. Okay. So the model is by default a dynamic object. It's going to go at runtime and inspect and try and find a name property to output here. And there's the name that I passed through. Now, right, it's dynamic. If I gave it a incorrect property name, even though it's lowercase, it's not the appropriate name of that property, it's going to fail here, right? Because that's a dynamic type. And that might be appropriate for the way you're building an application to use dynamic types. But when you use dynamic types, you're not going to get any assurance that it works properly until you actually execute the code. And my product doesn't have something called name with a lowercase n. So what you can do, and this is where I was getting ahead of myself, you can specify the type of your model with a model directive up at the top of the page. And I can specify my model is of type product. Now if I save, look at this. My build fails right here. Product does not contain a definition for name. I don't even get to the point that a visitor could trip over the mistake that I made in my view, right? It's a compiler error. It blocks and prevents that interaction. So by strongly typing our views, by providing a type for my model, I'm also getting a little bit of help from my editor here. You see that the editor is putting a red underline there saying, this isn't a thing. So I can control space. It'll, inside of Visual Studio, it'll find and capitalize that appropriately. If I save, it'll rebuild and runs properly. And now over here, everything runs properly. I get my page rendered and it has the content. So these are the different ways that we pass a model through. I see a couple questions coming through on chat here. Let me take a look and answer some of these questions. Where did it go? This one from Vincent. Yeah, let me start with this question from Vincent. So how do you pass multiple models into our page and use those within the view? Is that something that people do? So there's a little bit of an argument to be said here that if you're passing multiple models onto a page, you've got a very complex page that may be too complex for how folks want to interact with it. You could also compose models, data that came from different repositories, into, back to a little bit of the topic of a view model, a model that is appropriate for this view. Maybe there's a product display here that I want to show, and to go a little bit into Vincent's topic here, maybe there's a model here that I want to talk about, right? That also is discounts, right? Maybe there's a discount here, and it's an int, and there's a discount ID, and right, there's a decimal, and it's right, for whatever the savings is, and I want to display those discounts with the products that are being displayed, right? And if I go back to my home controller, right? Oh, we got from some sort of a web service, right, that there's a discount on this product, and that discount is ID 2, and the savings is 15%. Okay, and I want to display, hey, if you want to buy Fritz's Microsoft hat, there's a 15% discount. Well, you can't pass those two objects through. So you want to really have either some sort of a class that pulls together these two objects as one model that you're possibly displaying, right? So you might have, right, this is a little bit of that view model concept. You're putting together a model specific to this view, right? So, right, I may define something like this, and it has a a property here for the product, right? And another one here for the discount that you want to display. So then instead of just returning my hat and discount, well, now I'm going to output this, and I may say, come here, you. Product equals my hat, discount equals discount, and back in here, I'm going to change this to, it's now, right, product view model, which, where did it go? It's in, yeah. So I need to actually give this a namespace. There we go. Right, come on now. My first application. There, now it found it. Okay. Why don't you like that? There. And let it refresh. Here it goes. I promise. It's waiting for the rebuild. Where is it? Yes. Here. Now I don't have model.name, I have model.product.name. And now it'll update and should show me the right content. Here it comes. All right. So now I'm passing multiple concerns through. I can grab those, format, and place appropriately. So, okay. So, does it make sense to aggregate those things? Maybe. That's going to be an application decision that you need to make. If you're bringing in many different concerns from many different locations, are you making your user interface too complicated for your users? Don't know. That's going to be a decision that you need to make with your designers and your application, your application designers as well, not just your user interface designers. I also want to show you, when I was looking here, right, I had to provide the full domain, the full namespace for this, right? That's a pain in the neck. You can also add using statements to your views. Ah, rats. What was it? My first application, controllers, and now you don't have to specify everything, right? You can add using statements just like you would inside of a class file. It'll carry those using statements over to the output and things will continue working. Now, right, I can add for loops and if statements and interact with my Razor template easily just by starting at if, right? And I can say if model.discount does not equal null, if I do have a discount, right? Let's do this. Let's see what we can make angry here. Today there's a and I can say model discount savings toString sale, right? And we can see what that looks like on my page. When there is a sale, we need to announce it, and oh, the blink tag didn't work. Rats. I so wanted to. But I've added some conditions into my template, right? I've added my first little bit of logic here that I want to test on the model that's being presented. If there is a discount, show it. I really wanted to show a blink tag. That would have been great. Rats. Yeah, deprecated, I know. So, right, I've done some testing here inside of, and I can do for loops as well with a similar structure, right? I can say I can do a for each, and whatever code is in here, it'll loop over my collection and output that HTML. You can do a standard for var I equals 0, I less than 10, right? And it'll count and you can interact with. All of those work because this is really, like I said, it's a mashup of C# and HTML. Marcus is right. The using statement up here, just like several of the other directives that we have, you can move those out into this view imports file, and it'll make that it'll apply the contents of this to the top of every view that you have inside your application. So you have some freedom to interact and work with your code. So Spartan, you can take a look at the repository that we have for this series. There's links to all the other videos that we have here, links to all of the Jupyter notebooks that you can run in your browser to learn C# directly. So let's talk a little bit more about, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'm going a little bit back and forth inside of what I wanted to show. I showed the for loop. Oh, our content that's being emitted from here is being HTML encoded. So if the name of my product, right, if somehow somebody happened to load into my product, maybe for some reason my product's name is like that. It's got an HTML tag in the middle of that name, right? That looks kind of weird, right? This is somebody trying to inject and do some cross-site scripting. But when I'm emitting my content here, right, it automatically HTML encodes that. So if we go back over to my page, you see it emits the HTML encoding for that, so that I don't get tripped up with it outputting code that would be invalid, right? And that's actually, if we take a look, it'll be a little bit clearer here, right? It's escaped the tag characters, the angle brackets, so I don't inadvertently output some information that shouldn't be handled, shouldn't be presented on my page, that changes the formatting, right? That's a problem. Now, if you do want to take it into your own hands, you want to try your hand at this, you want to figure out and let it ride, let the HTML that's written into whatever behind the scenes, let it be written directly into my output, you can use the html.raw command to say, this is raw HTML. Don't escape it. You're allowed to output it. Now, this is something that I would avoid using. There is very small number of circumstances where you do want to use the HTML raw tools, because when you do use it, anything that's written inside of your objects, that's written inside of the code that you're telling Razor to format and place on screen, will be formatted and placed on screen regardless of the content. It will drop it directly there. No HTML encoding. You could inadvertently create a cross-site scripting issue. Okay? If somebody writes some script into that product name, it's going to execute. So don't do that. Don't avoid that. You usually don't need to do that, okay? So we really recommend that you avoid HTML raw unless absolutely necessary. And there are very small number of circumstances when you need to do that. I see a couple more questions coming up here. I'm going to get to Ember Code's question here in just a minute. I answered Spartan's question. This is basics. We're intending to be beginner friendly here. Vincent has a question about the HTML encoding. Can you restrict people from using specific HTML tags instead of allowing all? For example, people that want to use bold, italic, or underscore for their text. If you want to do something like that, and that's a perfectly valid interaction, you want to allow folks to submit data that's going to be a description, maybe, that you want to allow some rich formatting in. If you're going to do that, the recommended practice is allow Markdown. And we can use a Markdown library, a Markdown formatting library, to appropriately format the data back into HTML tags when it's being written onto our page. That way, tags like script tags, link tags to bring in other CSS and change the format of our page, those won't be allowed. They'll be blocked and prevented, and you're not actually allowing HTML tags. Otherwise, you're going to be inspecting your code and doing tests on data that's submitted to your server to test and see if it's allowed, if it's formatted. You don't trust submissions from visitors to your website. Don't do it. Somebody's going to try and mess up your website. Try to avoid that. We don't want to trust them. So, Markdown is a preferred way to do that. Yes. You could use a library that sanitizes HTML except for specific tags, but out of the box, ASP.NET Core explicitly just encodes all the tags. You're taking a little bit of a risk. It's your code then if you want to start saying, well, these tags are allowed and these ones aren't. So by default, it's as secure as possible. Nothing is allowed. Okay? It's your choice if you want to start allowing and parsing and presenting those on screen. Now, let me come to this question that Amber Code asks. Isn't MVC dead? So ASP.NET Core MVC has been around. Like I said, it was originally released with .NET Framework in 2008-2009. Came out with ASP.NET 3.5. And so it's been around for a long time, and there's very much a movement, a concern from .NET web developers that the MVC framework, as you've seen here, I've had to write 3 objects to generate one web page, a model, a view, and a controller. Creating those 3 files is a lot of work. It's a lot more code that I need to write so that I can have those 3 separate things to present a web page. There are folks who prefer to use Razor pages instead of MVC and the way that this is structured. There are other developers who prefer the regimented nature of this so that they can have very structured controller, very structured set of views that are very clean in that when I want to modify the presentation, I only go into the view. I don't have to touch all of the other concerns where I may inadvertently change some business logic inside of a controller or inside of a page when I'm just trying to put a bold tag on something, right? Something silly. By separating those concerns and making rendering of one web page into separate files, now it gives you the ability to separate responsibilities of your application as well. Your developers that are building server-side concerns can work and live inside of their controllers classes. And your folks that interact into your data architecture can work inside of the models and the repositories that deliver those models. And the folks that are designers can work inside the views folders, and they won't trip over those other folks. They won't collide in source control because they're formatting content that's being presented to them inside the views. Also, MVC, as we're going to see here either next time or the week after, MVC provides the headless interactions to be able to present and interact with data. In fact, I may even touch on that a little bit here. So, so let's see here. So we've presented some views and we've seen how to interact with those. I showed you the using interaction. There's also, you can inject, just like we heard about dependency injection a few episodes ago, and we we're injecting a logger here, we can inject that logger or other objects that are registered with our dependency injection container. We can inject them directly into the view so that they're available for us to work with. So perhaps I want to inject the logger here. I want to log information. So I can inject an iLogger. There we go. And let's call this just logger. I can call this whatever I'd like, right? I can call it goo. No, I'm going to call it foo. And, right, this is the name of the variable that I'm working with. So I'll call it just logger. Yeah, I thought there was. This needs to be, I think it's Microsoft extensions logging. There it is. Cool. So I can now work with my logger on the page, right? So maybe I get to the bottom of the page here. I can actually interact with it, and I can say logger. I don't have my entire using statement here. Right, I could say logger dot. I want to say I really should put the using statement for this out here. Give me a second. Let's do this. At using. You don't typically have a logger in the middle of your page. There we go. And I can say, let's say log information, home page was delivered, right? And that'll refresh my page here in a second. Can I convert from void to, oh. So this is going to try and output the HTML for that. Well, there is, log information doesn't return any data. So we actually want this to be a code block that's executed. And we can define blocks of code where maybe we define variables, we assign variables by surrounding with curly braces. So that'll be executed. Right, look at this. No service for iLogger was registered. What? What? Let's get an iLogger factory. I didn't specify what type of logger it was. No, let's do this. Controller logger. Now that'll work. Building, here it comes. Oh yeah. Come on. There it is. Homepage was delivered. There it is, logged. Right, it was some information for the home controller. Homepage was delivered, and there's my page. So I've injected a logger using the inject method up at the top of the page. Right, this inject directive, and it's now available to me on my page. So that's not bad. That's an interesting way to interact with and make some of these cross-cutting services available to us. Use this sparingly. There might be things like configuration you want to pass in. That's okay. But really, most of the content that you want to render on your view should come through your model object. We want our views to be dumb. We want them to have very little logic in it, right? An if section that tests for a scenario and decides to render or not render something, or to display something with a special indicator that, right, that this is to be, take a specific CSS style, apply a specific class to some formatting. Keep that logic in the view. The decisions about how to format, business logic about how to interact with, keep that somewhere else. Keep that in your controller. Keep that in your business classes that are going to make those decisions about how your applications run and work. All right. We are coming up to the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that I go through, let me see. I can cover functions real quick. Let me add, before I get to functions, so I did, the product we're showing is this. I can also, right, this is implicitly outputting the content of that as a string here. I can also explicitly output the content of some C# code. I can say yesterday was, and if I want to specify the day of the week here, I can't say date time today, add days, right? Oh, this isn't going to work the way I want it to. Think. How did I do this? No. I had a different sample for this. Where did it go? Oh, here we go. Let's say minutes left to the top of the hour. That's what I want to do. To the top of the hour. Right? So I could say datetime dot hour, right? Datetime now hour. And if I want to figure out the total number of minutes, well, I've got to subtract that from now, right? Datetime dot now dot right. That's not a good example. Left in the day, minutes left in the day. That'll be a good way to do this, right? So if I say datetime, I want to say something like datetime now minus datetime dot today dot add days 1, right? So it's the start of tomorrow. That needs to be reversed, right? Let's reverse that. So that's the beginning of tomorrow minus now. Well, wait a sec. See, Visual Studio is helping me here. See how this is formatted? We get the highlight like C#. Well, at this point, Razor is pivoting and saying, oh, that's text. You mean text there. And I can't take this and put an @ sign here because it still sees this as a dash, right? If I save that, it's going to output and render that as 2 dates. See, 2 dates. There's tomorrow, there's now. So how do we get the difference between those? Just wrap it with parentheses. And now I can say, right, actually I need 2 parentheses because I want to do that math. I want to say total minutes, and it'll output the total number of minutes now. Explicitly doing that calculation and dropping the entry into my code. There you go. Minutes left in the day, right? And if I refresh, it recalculates and shows me. So lots of different ways to do this. And format your content. And formatting things inside of our view is intended to be very easy for you to just drop an @ sign and here's some C# code for you to execute, right? Or here's a block of code to execute. Don't output anything from this, but we're going to use this content elsewhere in our page. Now, I talked briefly about the layout and passing information back and forth, and we mentioned it last time, so I don't think I need to go into that any further today. But I do want to talk about, well, we've been rendering views from our controller, and I kind of forced into, right, returning a view of this. Well, what if we don't want to return HTML? What if we want to return this in some other format? There are other formatters that are available as part of the base controller class that come in the box, if you will. Things like JSON. And I can tell it, well, don't return the view. Instead, return this formatted as JSON. And now instead, it returned JSON for me. And you see Firefox is formatting that JSON appropriately for me. So this is something that makes sense, right? Sometimes you want to return JSON. Sometimes you don't. Right? There used to be... Yeah, it's not there. There used to be an XML command that you could use to format and return data. There is a content command that you can use to specify return this string content. And see, it doesn't like being past this model, right? So even if I put a toString on the end of that, it's going to look kind of weird, but it's going to format and output that that string, and the string for a class is just the name of the class. It's not the actual contents of it, rendered as JSON or some other format. Now, in addition to those, right, and this might make sense if you just want to output a string, right, that maybe it has a version number or some sort of a stamp that something else is going to consume, right? So if I want to output just the string foo, I can put that in there and it will return, I'll wait for Karnak to disappear, foo. Big deal, right? I've output and I've taken full control over the string that I'm writing into the page. Okay, that might make sense. There's times that absolutely makes sense to show. However, there are other times where you want to allow the client to specify, well, what type of format do we want? Do we want to allow to be returned? So I can actually return not just that new product view model, but I can return an OK result. If I just say return OK, right, that's going to run, it's going to compile first. Come on, get to the end there. There it is. And if I refresh, there's no content, but if I look at the network, it returned a 200 status OK, and there was nothing in the response. It just returned OK. That succeeded. I can return OK with an object that I want you to specify, and I'll pass that new product view model. And now we're handing off processing of this. This is now interacting and working headlessly with whoever's requesting this and saying, sure, this method rendered OK, 200 status OK, it rendered properly. Here's an object for you to interact with. And this object is going to be delivered in the same format that was requested. Let me explain. I'll refresh the page and you'll see it didn't return what I wanted. Where is it? Did I forget to save? I forgot to save. Save the page, Jeff. There, it's rebuilding, rerunning, and I'll refresh the page and I get JSON. I got JSON because if you look at the request here, by default, when a request comes in from the browser, it passes a content type header that here it is. It passes an accept header here that says these are the formats that I accept, that I can work with, I know how to present. I can present text HTML, I can present application XHTML and XML, I can present application XML. I can also present images with web processing, WebP, and at the end, I can pretty much handle anything else with these quality indicators, this Q equals, right? These are the preferred things that I can present. So one of the defaults that if you don't pass in an accept header is that MVC will say, oh, well, maybe you accept JSON, and it will return application JSON. All right. You can provide, and this is where we're going to pick up when we talk about APIs, probably in 2 weeks. You can provide in your accept header here, here's the type of content that I want, and inside of your application, you can give it a series of different formatters that will automatically be applied to format and render content. We do need to get into partial views. Let me make sure I get to that. So we've now rendered content in different formats. We have the same methods, the same interactions inside of our controller here. I think, yeah, I accidentally clicked the installer. But how I'm rendering it is different. So that's not bad. I can live with that, right? My logic is the same, but deliver it in different formats. But in our view now, the last piece I want to cover is partial views. there might be parts of our page here that we're going to reuse across many different pages that we want to make sure we show on all those pages. So maybe there's this here, this greeting we want to include on all of our pages. Well, we can move that out into what's called a partial view, into a template that will be included on many different pages. We can reference it and it'll change just in that one place, right? We add that little bit of abstraction. So I'm going to add a new, I'm going to add a new item here. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to look for a partial. It's not there. Fine, I'm going to grab a view. There we go. Razor view. Yeah, it's not there. So this one I'm going to call greeting. All right. Delete this content. Go back over here. I'll grab this little greeting bit and paste it in there. Now I don't have a greeting action, but from over here I can include that greeting by saying HTML dot, where is it? Render partial, and I can specify the name of that, and it'll place the output right there. So if I go back over here, let me make sure that built properly. Oh, you don't like. This should be. Yeah, I know what you're saying there. If I do that, you're still not going to like it, are you? Come on. There it goes. Now it's building. Nope. Yeah, I didn't save it. And it's still not outputting. If I wrap it, that's still not gonna. Yeah, there. Now it'll run. Right? There we go. Back over to here, refresh, and there's my greeting. So we've defined this partial that's available, and we can access, because it's sitting here inside of my home folder, by just saying render partial. And I don't actually have to put the await. I can change that to just render partial, and it'll rebuild and run that and deliver this content that we want to reuse. Now, the partial doesn't necessarily have to live inside of my home folder. I can move that down here into shared if I want to share it with all of my controllers, and it'll still work. There we go. Just rebuilt, and there it is. It's still delivering it, right? If I want to include that partial on my privacy page, right? Copy this over here on privacy page, down here at the bottom, paste it in, let it rebuild. There it goes. And if I go, oops, to privacy, there's my partial. So it's a way for us to reuse markup, reuse parts of our template by moving it into different files. And we can pass into our partials different information, different models as well, right? I can not just say render partial greeting, but I can also pass a model into it as well. So this, right, that might be somewhere where you want to pass in formatting for a product. Well, make that product formatting, make it a partial, and call it and pass in the product information, right? If I go back here to my index, right, maybe I want to pull this out. I can put that into, right, over here. Let's add a new, yeah, I keep trying to do that. And my Visual Studio has an extension or two here that's misbehaving. Right, and maybe I call this, right, product, right, or not even product. Let's call this product display, and it looks like this. I'm going to have, because this is a partial, model that is a product, right? Now I can get rid of this, and back in my index page, right, over here, I can do, and I'm purposely doing it this way. I know there's other ways to do this. come on, I hit page up. And I'm just about out of time here as well. Right, product, display, and I want to pass it the product. Well, that's going to be model.product. I'll let that rebuild. And now I've got a consistent display of my product across all of my pages because I'm passing that partial around. So these are ways that I can move around these various concerns that I want to reuse across this. So, is there any performance degradation by splitting out partial views? No. They're compiled in at runtime. They're compiled in at compile time, and they're just referenced like any other, like as though you were loading another class. Piece of cake. Not going to get into tag helpers today. We're right up against time. I was trying to do add view, but like I said, my Visual Studio is a little messed up because I've got some extra things installed. So that's all I wanted to get into today. Very beginner, touching on very basics of this, and learning about MVC and how we can interact with our code to build and deliver a website. And we're just handling the get operation of a website. Next time, we're going to talk about posting and interacting with forms, how we receive data back to our website, how we process that, how we take some next steps, some interactions with that will make our website more interactive, doing more cool things that we can present. This video, like all my other videos in this series, will be available over on YouTube. Check out youtube.com/dotnet and look for the C# on CSharpFritz playlist. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link to the playlist right here, and down here is a link to the previous video where we got started with ASP.NET Core. Thank you so much, friends. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching the recording, I'll see you next week.